back to AI for the Humanities. I'm Megan McInnes-Dominguez, Associate Professor of Spanish at the University of Delaware, and this channel is your go-to resource for exploring the intersection of generative AI and humanities education. We'll dive into the latest developments in large language models, or LLMs, discussing their benefits, challenges, ethical considerations, and practical applications in your classes. Our goal is to examine how these powerful tools relate to humanities education, and crucially, how the humanities can shape the future of AI. Whether you're new to AI or have been experimenting with these technologies in your teaching, you'll find valuable insights and practical tips here. Join us as we navigate this exciting frontier, exploring how the humanities can contribute to and benefit from the AI revolution. In recent years, large language models have transformed the field of natural language processing. These models, such as OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Google's Gemini, and Meta's Llama, have demonstrated remarkable capabilities in understanding and generating human-like text. One of the most promising applications of these models is text summarization. Summarization tools powered by AI are becoming crucial in humanities education, offering both benefits and risks. On the plus side, they help students grasp complex texts quickly, encourage critical thinking, and cater to diverse learning styles. These tools can save time, improve accessibility, and prepare students for future tech-driven environments. They also support research skills and foster interdisciplinary learning. However, there are potential drawbacks. Students might become overly reliant on these tools, leading to a decline in critical thinking. There's also the risk of inaccuracies in AI-generated summaries and concerns about intellectual property rights. AI bias could perpetuate stereotypes, and the convenience might tempt students to cut corners in their learning. Privacy and data security are additional concerns. Educators can guide students to use summarization tools ethically by teaching critical evaluation of AI-generated content, promoting transparency about AI use, and emphasizing proper citation practices. It's crucial to discuss AI's limitations and biases, set clear guidelines for tool usage, and focus on developing students' own analytical skills. Incorporating AI literacy into the curriculum helps students understand the ethical implications of these technologies. By modeling responsible use and creating assignments that require critical engagement with AI-generated content, educators can help students leverage these tools effectively while maintaining academic integrity. The goal is to use AI as an aid for learning and understanding, not as a replacement for students' own critical thinking and effort. We will examine how LLMs are trained to understand context, identify key points, and generate concise summaries that are both coherent and informative. By comparing the summarization capabilities of different LLMs, we aim to discover the strengths and limitations of each model, providing insights into their practical applications and potential improvements. Google has publicly launched two new AI models, Gemini 1.5 Flash and Gemini 1.5 Pro. Gemini 1.5 Flash is designed for speed and efficiency, being 40% faster than GPT 3.5 Turbo for 10,000 character inputs and 4 times cheaper. It's ideal for quick tasks, chatbots, and document processing, with a context window suitable for synthesizing entire repositories. Gemini 1.5 Pro, on the other hand, boasts a massive 2 million token content window, allowing it to process the equivalent of 2 hours of high-definition video as a single unit. It's better suited for complex tasks requiring comprehensive understanding and higher quality outputs. Both models are multimodal, capable of working with text, images, and videos, with Flash optimized for speed and Pro for handling larger datasets and more intricate problems. Meta has launched its largest LLM, Llama 3, which is a significant advancement in AI technology. Unlike the other models we will be seeing today, Llama is open source. This new model promises improved accuracy and efficiency and ranges up to 65 billion parameters, making it Meta's most powerful AI yet. This launch is pivotal as it aims to enhance natural language processing tasks, including translation, summarization, and more complex AI applications. It's close to matching GPT-4's MLLU score with less than 50% of the parameters. This is a big deal and makes it a serious competitor with OpenAI. Meta's Llama 3 is expected to be a game changer in AI, offering more sophisticated tools for developers and researchers. Quora's chatbot Poe has drawn criticism for its feature allowing users to download paywalled articles. This function enables users to bypass subscription fees, raising legal and ethical issues around copyright infringement and content creator compensation. While some argue that it democratizes access to information, critics worry that it undermines publishers' revenue streams and disincentivizes quality journalism. This debate highlights the tension between making information accessible and protecting intellectual property rights in the digital era. Anthropic has created a new prompt playground for Claude 3.5 Sonnet that caters to both AI novices and experienced users. For newcomers, it offers an intuitive interface to experiment with prompts, see immediate results, and learn prompt engineering basics. Meanwhile, seasoned practitioners benefit from advanced features like comprehensive test suites using real-world or AI-generated scenarios, side-by-side prompt comparisons, and simultaneous application of changes across test cases. The tool includes a built-in prompt generator and a 5-point rating scale for response assessment. While it makes AI more accessible to beginners, it also significantly enhances workflow for experts, allowing them to fine-tune prompts for specialized tasks and push the boundaries of AI applications. This partial automation of prompt engineering frees up experienced users to focus on more complex development aspects. Ultimately, the playground aims to democratize AI use in various fields, including the humanities, by providing a platform where both novices and experts can improve their AI interactions efficiently. Anthropic has also launched a new initiative to develop third-party model evaluations, aiming to improve AI model transparency and reliability. This initiative seeks to create standardized assessment methods, enabling consistent and independent evaluations of AI models. By involving external evaluators, Anthropic intends to ensure that AI systems are rigorously tested for safety, fairness, and performance. This move is part of Anthropic's broader mission to advance AI responsibly, promoting ethical standards and trust in AI technologies. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, has recently faced a series of security challenges that add to previous concerns. Their Mac ChatGPT application was found to be storing user conversations in plain text without encryption, prompting a quick update to address the issue. Additionally, last year, a hacker gained unauthorized access to OpenAI's internal communication systems, which exposed potential vulnerabilities. Further complicating matters, as I mentioned in my last video, Leopold Aschenbrenner, a former technical program manager, raised security concerns and claimed he was dismissed for disclosing sensitive information, although OpenAI disputed his claims. These incidents have raised questions about OpenAI's internal governance and procedures, highlighting the challenges the company faces in developing advanced AI technologies while maintaining user trust and data security. In other OpenAI news, Microsoft and Apple have decided to step down from their positions on OpenAI's board amid increasing regulatory scrutiny. Microsoft, which previously held a non-voting observer seat, has relinquished its role, while Apple has withdrawn its plans to join the board. This decision comes in response to growing antitrust concerns surrounding Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI. Regulatory bodies in the UK and EU have launched investigations into this collaboration, and the FTC is examining investments made by tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google in AI companies such as OpenAI and Anthropic. Microsoft's significant investment of over $10 billion in OpenAI has made it the exclusive cloud partner for the organization, allowing Microsoft to integrate OpenAI's advanced models into its products and services. In light of these developments, OpenAI has shifted its engagement strategy with key partners. Instead of board representation, the organization will now conduct regular stakeholder meetings to enhance collaboration and transparency regarding its mission and progress. This change reflects OpenAI's commitment to addressing regulatory concerns and fostering strategic partnerships in the evolving AI industry. Finally, I have some news about regulation of AI in the US. In a recent development, the US Supreme Court struck down the Chevron deference, a 40-year-old ruling that allowed federal agencies to interpret ambiguous congressional laws. With the removal of this long-standing legal principle, federal agencies no longer have the same latitude to interpret ambiguous congressional laws. Consequently, crafting precise and effective regulations for the rapidly evolving AI industry becomes more challenging. The unpredictability and rapid pace of the AI industry make this task even more daunting. Policymakers must now navigate the complexities of AI without relying on broad agency discretion, potentially leading to a more fragmented regulatory landscape and increasing uncertainty for developers and businesses. In the remainder of today's video, we will be comparing the summarization capabilities of the largest LLMs. I will be testing the most powerful versions of each LLM. Some are available with limited tokens, like ChatGPT 4.0 and Claude Sonnet 3.5, while others allow you to try these models for 1 month for free, such as Gemini Pro, which uses the 1.5 technology, and Copilot Pro. Perplexity AI, like Microsoft's Copilot, they both often don't appear in traditional LLM rankings due to their specialized function as AI-powered search engines that incorporate existing LLMs, such as ChatGPT 4 in the case of Copilot, and they focus on providing quick, accurate responses rather than generating long-form text. Their evaluation metrics emphasize information retrieval efficiency, making them different from general-purpose LLMs, which are assessed based on their language generation capabilities across various tasks. This specialization means Perplexity AI and Copilot are better measured by their ability to provide accurate and relevant search results, rather than the broad language understanding and general capabilities typical of other LLMs. When considering the best models for humanities education, several key factors come into play: summarization accuracy, creative applications, context window size, multimodal capabilities, and image generation. Here's a detailed comparison of the leading models: ChatGPT 4.0, Claude Sonnet 3.5, Gemini 1.5, Llama 3, Copilot Pro, and Perplexity AI. We will start with ChatGPT 4.0. Known for its high-quality, coherent, and contextually appropriate responses, ChatGPT excels in generating human-like text and is widely used for content creation, summarization, and educational purposes. Regarding summarization, ChatGPT 4.0 excels in providing detailed and contextually accurate summaries, for the most part, which is beneficial for analyzing texts in humanities education. It's known for understanding free-form questions and offering comprehensive responses. Regarding the creative applications of ChatGPT 4.0, it's capable of generating creative writing prompts, essays, and detailed explanations of complex topics. It supports various teaching and learning activities, making it versatile for different classroom needs. Its context window offers a substantial size, allowing it to handle large volumes of text effectively. Its multimodal capabilities are impressive too. It handles text, audio, visual, and video inputs, enhancing the ability to create interactive and multimedia-rich educational content. It also generates images. It's integrated with tools like DALL-E 3, which provides a robust image generation capability for visual learning aids and creative projects. Developed by Anthropic, Claude 3.5 Sonnet emphasizes ethical AI use and safe language generation. It produces high-quality responses, particularly in contexts requiring sensitivity and ethical considerations. It's strong at generating accurate and coherent summaries. It's designed to handle extensive text inputs, which is useful for literature and historical analysis. It has quite a few creative applications. It offers tools for generating detailed literary analyses and can assist in developing complex narratives, making it suitable for higher-level humanities education. Similar to ChatGPT 4.0, it supports a large context window, facilitating in-depth analysis and comprehension of long texts. It also has quite a few multimodal capabilities. It focuses primarily on text, though it's highly effective in this domain as well. Regarding image generation, it does lack integrated image generation, which might limit its use in creating visual content. We'll now move on to Gemini 1.5. This recent Gemini model comes in two variants, Flash and Pro. Gemini 1.5 Pro offers a larger context window and is designed for more complex tasks, leading to higher quality outputs and detailed analyses, as well as extended content generation. Regarding summarization, it's known for speed and efficiency in generating summaries. It provides a balance between quick responses and detailed output, which is useful in dynamic classroom settings. It's versatile in generating creative content, including essays and research outlines. The Pro version, with its extensive context window, is particularly useful for complex tasks. The context window is quite large. The Pro version offers up to 2 million tokens, making it one of the most powerful models for handling large texts. Regarding multimodal capabilities, it supports text, images, and videos, making it suitable for a variety of educational materials. Its image generation is also impressive. It's capable of generating detailed images, enhancing its utility for visual aids and creative projects in the humanities. Meta's Llama 3 is its largest model, designed to be a strong competitor to GPT-4. It performs well in natural language understanding and generation, suitable for a wide range of applications, including educational content. Regarding summarization, it provides efficient and accurate summaries, close to the performance of top models like GPT-4, despite having fewer parameters. Regarding creative applications, it's effective in generating detailed literary and historical content. It's suitable for a wide range of educational tasks, from basic summaries to in-depth analyses. Regarding context window, it supports a substantial context window, allowing for comprehensive text analysis. Its multimodal capabilities are primarily focused on text, but it's very effective in that domain. At this time, it does not include image generation capabilities, which might limit its use in creating visual content. We'll now turn to Copilot Pro, which is integrated into productivity tools to assist with tasks like code generation and document drafting. While not always ranked among general-purpose LLMs, it delivers high-quality assistance within specific use cases. It excels in summarization with enhanced accuracy and context understanding, making it suitable for detailed literary analysis. Regarding creative applications, it's highly effective in generating creative writing prompts and educational content, aiding in various classroom activities. It offers a large context window, facilitating detailed analysis and comprehension of extensive texts. It supports multimodal inputs, enhancing its versatility in creating interactive and media-rich content. Regarding image generation, it's integrated with DALL-E, providing robust image generation capabilities for visual learning aids. We'll now move on to our last model, Perplexity. Perplexity focuses on providing quick, accurate answers to specific queries. It is highly effective in search and information retrieval, but less versatile in extended content generation compared to other LLMs. Perplexity uses advanced AI, including powerful language models like GPT-4. The Pro version allows you to select between GPT-4 Omni, Claude 3, Llama 3, and more to grasp the meaning behind your questions. It's also known for providing well-sourced summaries, which is essential for academic rigor and humanities education. It adds footnotes to show where it gets the information. Regarding creative applications, it's effective in generating structured content and well-researched essays, useful for various educational purposes. It also offers a large context window, supporting detailed text analysis. Regarding its multimodal capabilities, It's primarily text-focused, but it's highly effective in that domain. Like some of our other models, it lacks integrated image generation, which might limit its use for visual content. In summary, for humanities education, ChatGPT 4.0 and Gemini 1.5 stand out due to their extensive capabilities in both text and image generation, making them highly versatile tools for a range of educational activities. Claude 3.5 Sonnet and Llama 3 are also strong contenders, particularly for their text analysis and summarization capabilities. Copilot Pro offers a balanced approach with robust text and image generation, while Perplexity is excellent for well-sourced summaries, but lacks image generation capabilities. So now let's see how these LLMs handle summarizing a classic piece of literature, Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. I picked this 1854 text because its storyline is familiar to many, though it's very far afield from the work I do in the study of Hispanic literature. We'll start by asking each model to summarize the text based on their knowledge from online sources, then provide them with a link to the text, and finally use a detailed prompt. So we're going to start our testing with ChatGPT 4.0. We are simply going to ask it to summarize A Telltale Heart without any further instructions to see what it comes up with. Keep in mind, this is a very well-known work, so it's going to have a lot of information it's going to find on the web, and we'll see where this puts us. Maybe I'll be nice and ask it to please summarize. I don't always say please, but I'm feeling nice today. There we go. It starts off with delves, which is a very clear indication that this is ChatGPT. Let's see what it says. It's a chilling narrative that delves into the mind of an unreliable narrator. And it begins with a narrator vehemently denying that he is mad while explaining his obsession with an old man's vulture-like eye. Driven by this obsession, the narrator decides to murder the old man to rid himself of the eye forever. So this is good basic, I guess, narration of what happened in the work to start out with. There are a lot of details that, of course, are missing, such as the importance of different sounds that he hears, which add to the suspense. And it's true that he is obsessed with this man's eye, and he does then begin to plan the murder, sneaking into the old man's room each night for 7 nights, waiting for the perfect moment. On the 8th night, the old man wakes up and the narrator sees the eye, spurring him to commit the murder. And so, once again, brief, maybe the main points, but not very much detail here. He doesn't talk about the fact that he went and he didn't just go into the room every night. He would wait and wait and wait, slowly opening the door very, very slowly. And he would sneak a lantern in that he would turn on just ever so slightly so it would shine onto this one eye of the old man. And it would always be closed, it would always be closed. And then that night that he commits the murder, the eye is open. And so this is an important detail that's not here. He does dismember the body and hide it under the floorboards, and he is confident he has committed the perfect crime. He cleans up, doesn't tell you this, but he cleans up a lot, and he makes sure that nobody would find anything, any sort of remnant of this old man's body in the house. And so the police arrive to investigate, yes, but that is before the narrator's guilt manifests as an auditory hallucination of the old man's heart still beating beneath the floor. So it's kind of inverting the order here a little bit. So yes, the narrator remains calm initially, but becomes increasingly agitated by the sound, and he does confess the murder. So this does have some of the main points. It has left out some important details, though, and has changed the order of things. So I don't know how we would grade this, but I would not be satisfied with this summary. And this is a well-known work. So I'm going to see now how other models do the same. We're now going to test out the summarization capabilities of Claude 3.5 Sonnet. We're going to do the same thing that we did with ChatGPT 4.0. We're just going to ask it to give us a simple summary. We are not going to give it a detailed prompt because we want to see what it knows and what it comes up with. So we play it again here. Let's see what happens. And it's going to give a concise summary. If you don't tell it what to do, and oh, that's interesting. It asks if we want to go in any more detail. Well, that's something we'll do later. So yes, it's published in 1843. It's narrated by an unnamed man, that's true, who's trying to convince the reader of his sanity. That's a detail we didn't see in the last summary, while describing a murder that he committed. He lived with an old man and grew to despise this man's vulture eye. Obsessed with this eye, the narrator decides to murder the old man. For 7 nights, he sneaks into the old man's room, but doesn't kill him because the eye is closed. On the 8th night, he finally sees the eye open and smothers the old man. So, it doesn't say how he smothers him, but I kind of am liking this a little bit better because it doesn't have a lot of detail, but it has important detail. And it's true he doesn't murder him until the last night when the eye is open. And he smothers the old man, but he does this by placing the bed on top of the old man. This is a detail we didn't see in the last summary either. Maybe he smothers him that way. I guess that's how it worked. He then dismembers the body and hides it under the floorboards. He confidently lets the police in and chairs them in the room above the hidden corpse. So this is an important detail that also we didn't see in the other work. That's very important that they were there. And he was confident, but then, the narrator begins to hear what he believes is the old man's heartbeat growing louder and louder. Driven mad by the sound that only he can hear, he confesses to the murder and tells the police to tear up the floorboards. And it also gives a certain an explanation of the end, explores the themes of guilt, madness, and the human psyche. And yes, showcasing Poe's mastery of psychological horror. So, I kind of like this one a little bit better. It's still short, though. So it doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad summary just because it's short. Not at all. That's the goal of good summarization. So now we'll do the same for Google's Gemini. We'll see what it comes up with. Please summarize a telltale heart. No other details, just that. Okay, this is even shorter than the others, but as I said, it doesn't mean that it's not a good summary. So yes, an unnamed narrator tells of how they murdered an old man they lived with. Interesting. So it's interesting that it doesn't choose the specific gender, but it uses they, which is interesting. This is not something we've seen in the other summaries. The narrator insists they are not mad, but obsessed with the old man's vulture eye, which fills them with unease, and eventually drives them to commit the crime. So this is true, but this is, it doesn't provide too much detail. Let's see what it says on the second paragraph. After carefully planning and executing the murder, the narrator hides the dismembered body beneath the floorboards. So once again, this one doesn't explain how he killed them. It doesn't give any detail about the fact that it was over, I guess it's on the 8th night. He sees the eye open, doesn't have any detail about the lantern, doesn't have any detail about too much detail at least about the psychology behind this, the importance of sound. So Driven to the brink of madness by guilt and paranoia, the narrator confesses their crime to the police, exposing their own insanity and sealing their fate. Once again, this is true, but doesn't explain that he took the police, had them sit directly above the dismembered body that was in the floorboards below, which could be important. So this is a little too simple for me. I would not give this one a very good grade. I would say this one is produced by an LLM, but the student tried to show it to me because it's very lacking in detail, which is a telltale sign of the use of an LLM. We're now going to move on to Meta's Llama 3. So once again, we're just going to give a very simple prompt. Please summarize a telltale heart. Nothing more. Oh, this one's interesting. Oh, all right. This is a different format. So yes, it's published in 1843. Follows an unnamed narrator who attempts to convince the reader of his sanity while describing how he murdered an old man for whom he cared. So it's true. He did care about the old man. That's actually an important detail we haven't seen in the others. But let's see. The plot indicates that the narrator is driven by a growing unease and hatred for the old man's evil eye. Yes, which he believes to be a sign of the old man's wickedness. So this is actually a detail that we haven't seen in the others. It's a good detail. One night, the narrator sneaks into the old man's room and kills him. He then dismembers the body and hides it under the floorboards. So this is kind of the big strokes, the most important details, but once again, it is missing quite a bit of detail about the how the murder happened, how it happened on the 8th night, how over the first 7 nights he goes in, slightly opens the door, brings in the lantern, and shines it on the eye, but it's closed. It's only on the last night that it's open, and so that is why he kills him. So it doesn't include those details. And it says the narrator becomes increasingly unhinged as he hears the sound of the old man's heart beating beneath the floorboards. He becomes convinced the police can hear it too, and he ultimately confesses to the crime. So this is, if we just want a very, very, very simple summary, this has some of the biggest events in the story, but it really is lacking in detail. The themes are good. And what I like is that it includes symbolism. And this is not something that we've seen in the others. It represents the narrator's own guilt and paranoia, the old man's evil eye. That is very good. The heartbeat represents the narrator's conscience and the inescapable truth of his crime. So while it's not a very comprehensive summary, it does include other details we didn't ask for, which are themes and symbolism. So that's interesting. Now we're going to move on to Copilot. See how it performs. And remember, the Copilot is a little different. It uses, depending on the model, GPT-4. So this is what we have here. So we're going to ask it, please summarize a telltale heart. Uh-oh. Let's see what it's thinking. There, it does get the right story. Okay, well, that's a good sign. It has themes of guilt and paranoia. Here's a summary. The story is narrated by an unnamed individual who insists on his sanity. Let's go back up. Despite confessing to murdering an old man, the motive for the murder is not due to hatred or greed, but rather a fear and loathing of the old man's vulture-like pale blue eye. True. It's true. This is another good detail that it's including. It's not due to hatred or greed. I mean, we haven't seen this in the other summaries, but this is true. So this is interesting. They were all giving us different details that they deem important, and they're all important in their own way. But it's really, I guess it shifts the focus of the summary. And the narrator meticulously plans the murder, stealthily watching the old man sleep night after night, waiting for the right moment. Okay, here it does say on the 8th night, the narrator's presence awakens the old man, and the narrator, driven by the old man's terrified heartbeat, is compelled to commit the deed. He smothers the old man, dismembers the body, and hides it beneath the floorboards of the bedroom. So it does include some more detail here. It's the 8th night, and he smothers the old man. It doesn't mention that he places the bed over top of him. So this is, an important detail, but it's still decent. However, when the police arrive, alerted by a neighbor who heard the old man shriek, this is very good, and we didn't see it within the others. The narrator's guilt begins to manifest at the sound of the old man's beating heart. The relentless beating grows louder in the narrator's ears, driving him to confess the crime to the police in a fit of madness, urging them to tear up the floorboards where the body is hidden. The story is a powerful psychological portrait of a mind undone by its own guilt, showcasing Poe's mastery and exploring the darker corners of the human psyche. So you see here, it shows some of its sources, which we didn't see in the other summaries. Which is interesting and very useful. So a note on sources. The other LLMs, if you press them to give sources, do sometimes come up with sources, but whether or not they are reliable is another question. So this is something different about Copilot and also Perplexity that I think is important to see, that without even being prompted, they come up with sources that they use to document their reading. One thing to also note is that it's not using, what is it not using? The actual work. So it's all summaries from other sources. And that is where all of these are getting their summaries from. I mean, it may be able to access the Telltale Heart. It's available, and I'll actually be showing you that later. There are versions of it online, but most of the time they aren't using primary texts. They're using secondary readings. All right, so let's move on to Perplexity, which also shows its sources, which is an important feature. So we're going to ask it once again, please summarize Telltale Heart. Let's see what happens. I'm sure it's going to know it. You see, it leads with the sources. I want to say, I'm just curious. Yeah, so it does show sources, but once again, no primary sources, just secondary. Oh, we lost it. Let's just do it again. And doing it again doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come up with the same thing, but look, it's the same sources. So what is also really great about it is it shows where it used the sources in the summary. That's pretty fantastic. So The Telltale Heart is a short story by Edgar Allan Poe that explores the psychological unraveling of an unnamed narrator who commits murder. Here's a summary. The narrator lives with an elderly man and develops an irrational hatred for the old man's vulture eye. Despite claiming to love the old man, the narrator becomes obsessed with his eye and decides to murder him to be free of it. So it's just, it's including some decent detail here. For 7 nights, the narrator sneaks into the old man's room at midnight to watch him sleep, but refrains from acting because the eye is closed. On the 8th night, the narrator accidentally wakes the old man. Right, so that's how he kills him. He sees the eye, the man wakes up, and seeing the eye open, the narrator smothers the old man to death with the bed. I guess we can now agree. The narrator then meticulously dismembers the body and hides it under the floorboards. When police arrive to investigate it, a reported scream, the narrator confidently welcomes them in, believing the crime to be undetectable. However, as the police chat with the narrator, he begins to hear what he believes is the beating of the dead man's heart, growing louder and louder. Driven mad by the sound, likely his own guilty conscience, the narrator eventually breaks down and confesses to the murder, telling the police to tear the floorboards to find the body. So yeah, this is interesting. So it gives, this summary is pretty decent. It hits the most important points, I think. It doesn't go into too much detail, but this, I think this is a pretty solid summary. Throughout the story, Poe uses first-person narration to delve into the protagonist's deteriorating mental state, blurring the lines between reality and delusion. Yes, the tale explores themes of guilt, madness, and the power of conscience while maintaining a tense, suspenseful atmosphere. It keeps readers engaged until the shocking conclusion. Okay, so you can now see all of these different LLMs have different capabilities regarding summarization, and they don't all come up with the same summary at all. They're all very different. They all focus on different things. If you want just a general summary, perhaps this one might be one of the strongest. I might be saying that because it's the last, but you can see they all do it in some capacity. And this is a well-known work. So it is able to find all these LLMs are able to find a lot of articles about it. So what we're going to do next is ask the LLMs to summarize the text with an actual copy of the work. So not based on outside knowledge, but simply on the text itself. And we'll see what happens. We're now going to go back to each of the LLMs and give them the text itself as a way to tell whether or not they can do a close reading with simply the text, and we'll see if they bring in any outside information. That's the question. So here is a good copy of the text from the Poe Museum, and I'm going to just click on the link and bring it over. Some of them will be able to open links and some won't. We'll see. So we're going to do another simple prompt. I'm going to get into a more detailed prompt later. Little prompt engineering here today, not at this time. Please summarize this work. Let's see what happens. Remember, it didn't do such a great job with the previous summary, but and it doesn't do a great job here. It is a very, very simple summary. We could say, maybe, please provide a more detailed summary based on the text. Once again, it doesn't do a great job. This is just a very, very, very basic summary. And so this is just something I find very interesting because, so when I teach my language classes, and I mainly teach literature, and I've used this in the past. I use it for all different types of activities, whether they're for my 200 level, 300, 400 level classes. But with Hispanic texts, even for the more well-known ones, it might do a very poor reading just from its own knowledge. It usually does better when I provide the text. So it's very interesting to me here that in an English work that it's doing poorly in this context. So I'm going to go on to see how this works for Claude. We'll see. Please summarize this text. You're going to see what happens. So you see, I apologize, but I'm not able to access or read the content at that URL. To summarize a text, I would need the actual text content pasted directly into our conversation. So this is what it needs. So it's interesting. It's not unable just to go directly to a web page. So we could just simply go here and select the. Hopefully this works. So you see when I pasted it there, it shows, it's because it's a longer text. Let's see if it follows my, yeah. Aha. This is not as bad. Story is narrated by an unnamed person who assists their saying while describing the murder of an old man. And DeepC says he was driven to kill him because of his vulture eye. Over 8 nights, the narrator sneaks into the old man's room, watching him sleep. On the 8th night, the old man wakes up, and the narrator, hearing the old man's frightened heartbeat, is driven to kill him. You know, I don't know if you remember the last time that we did this search on Claude, but it was definitely better. It was short too, but it had more detail. Narrator begins to hear what they believe is the old man's still beating heart. The sound grows louder still. Overcome with the guilt and terror, the narrator confesses to the murder and tells the police where to find the body. So, I mean, this is not bad, but I feel like when it used the web, it did a better job, which is interesting. So I'm going to go back here. We're going to go to Gemini. I'm going to see if it knows it. And you see, I cleared out, I started a new chat because I want it to, well, it can still store previous chats in memory, but I don't want it to be related to the past prompt I gave. So please summarize this text. This one does. Once again, well, this one shows the website from which it came, which is good. But it is, I mean, I am just really blown away by how bad it is when you actually give the text. This is really disturbing for those of us who want a tool to be able to summarize text for us that can be reliable. And it just does a better job when in English, at least, when it's given the text, or it's asked to scrape the web for the text. So we'll try with Meta, Llama 3, see what it does. The story follows an unnamed narrator who attempts to convince the reader of his sanity while describing how he murdered the old man for whom he cared. The narrator is driven by the old man's evil eye, which he believes to be a sign of the old man's wickedness. The narrator carefully plans and executes the murder, dismembering the old man's body and hiding it under the floorboards. However, it becomes increasingly unhinged by the sound of the old man's heart still beating under the floorboards. So, if you remember, it kind of included some of these details in the last iteration, but this is in less detail. This is simply in less detail than it was bad. It's not before. It's not that it's bad or wrong, but it's just that it's not as detailed as when asked to use it on the web. So we'll move on to Copilot to see if it does any better. Let's see. This is interesting. Remember, we're going to do a more detailed prompt next, and so we'll see what happens. Please summarize this text. This one's more detailed. So once again, this is shorter. This is shorter than its previous version, has far less detail. I mean, it's not that it's wrong. And if you want a very brief summary, this is fine. But and that might be exactly what you need to do in a class is, okay, this is a great opportunity, actually. So you bring this into the class and you say, oh, here's a summary I found on Copilot of the work we've read for today. What can we do to make this a stronger summary? What's missing? What details do we need to provide? You know, what are the literary devices it uses? So you could ask it for more detail. You can show students, listen, this is what's been produced. Critique it for me. Like, what is wrong with it? What needs more explanation? So this is actually an opportunity for critical engagement. If done properly. And you see it does include this website that we just put in there, but it's still it says it twice, but still the same one that it had used before. And finally, Perplexity. Please summarize this text. Let's see if it can do it. Yes, so it's interesting. All but Claude are able to go to the website. And Claude can still summarize if you just paste, but that can sometimes be difficult. So this is a nice feature. Once again, oh, look at this. Look at this. It is using just the primary text, and it's offering quotes, the quotes from which it took these pieces of the summary. So this has a very practical utility in a class if you want to show students how to properly cite and show that it's important not only to properly cite secondary sources, of course, but primary sources. You have to include quotes and things like that. And so this is very interesting. And let's see how accurate it is. It's a short story narrated by an unnamed protagonist who insists on his sanity while describing the murder he committed. The narrator becomes obsessed with an old man's pale blue vulture eye and decides to kill him to rid himself of this perceived evil. So this is interesting. And one thing that I liked how a previous summary had noticed that it was he loved the old man, but he doesn't say that here. Over the course of a week, the narrator secretly enters the old man's room at midnight, watching him sleep. On the 8th night, he accidentally wakes the old man, and after an hour of waiting in darkness, he decides to kill him. He smothers the old man with his own bed. Finally, we have a summary that includes that detail, and I think it's because we provided the primary source, right? And we asked it, focus on this. This is really what I was looking for, and this is what I see more when I do this with Hispanic texts, but this is very interesting. So yes, when the police arrive to investigate a reported shriek, the narrator confidently shows them around the house. However, as they sit and chat, the narrator begins to hear the beating of the old man's heart growing louder and louder. Driven mad by the sound that only he can hear, the narrator eventually breaks down and confesses to the murder, telling the officers to tear up the floorboards to find his body. So this, once again, is a very decent summary, and I really like how it shows where each element came from different parts of the text and which quotes specifically are related to it. This is quite interesting. So you see, all of these different LLMs have different abilities, and for different tasks, for different types of works, and you'll have to play around with it to see what works for you, and what's going to be the most useful. Now we're going to provide a detailed prompt for each LLM to see how it goes. We'll ask each one to summarize the short story's plot, highlighting the main characters and their development, identify the central conflict and its resolution, discuss the key themes and how the author's use of setting, point of view, and literary devices, such as symbolism or foreshadowing, contribute to these themes. Briefly describe the writing style and overall tone. Include one significant quote that encapsulates an important moment or theme, and conclude with a brief interpretation of the story's main message or significance. So we're going to start with ChatGPT 4o. So I'm going to cut and paste the prompts here. It's rather long. And we'll see what happens. And I'm just doing this based off of the textual prompt that I put in. One other thing I might like to do after we finish this is to see what sources come up. All right. So ChatGPT gives a basic summary in the beginning and now goes into the more detailed questions that I asked it. So the main characters and development, narrator, protagonist who's unnamed, whose mental instability is central to the story. This is true. They insist on their sanity while their actions reveal increasing paranoia and guilt. And then the old man, who is the victim, obviously. Narrator's obsession, which leads to his murder. So the central conflict and resolution is the narrator's battle with their own mind, which is true. This culminates with the obsession of the old man's eye. Key themes are guilt and paranoia, sanity versus insanity. Literary devices, the setting adds the story's tension, point of view for symbolism. The old man's eye symbolizes the narrator's obsession and the heart represents their overwhelming guilt, which is true. And foreshadowing, there are early mentions of the narrator's heightened senses, which hint to their eventual unraveling. And this is very, very good because this is what was missing from a lot of the summaries, is that they didn't talk about the sounds and other senses that the protagonist was feeling. So this is very good. That otherwise ChatGPT would not have included this detail. So the writing style and tone, right? It's characterized by Gothic elements, right? Significant quote is the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. And finally, interpretation. The story's main message is a psychological exploration of guilt, and in the descent into madness, Poe suggests that one's conscience can be an inescapable force driving them to reveal their own crimes. Just interesting. So do you see this? This is much better, but it's not in one paragraph form. It has to be divided up. One thing I want to do here is see if ChatGPT got this just from the one source I provided, or if it's looking externally. So I'll ask it, provide your sources. We will see what happens. This is always an interesting activity. So it just says it's based on the full text story by Edgar Allan Poe. And so this is interesting because I had included this in my chat where I provided the actual text. It's sticking to the actual text for this response. At least that's what it says. So now let's move on to Claude to see what it does with this prompt. All right, so it does respond to each point that I have submitted. So the plot summary, the story revolves around an unnamed narrator who murders an old man he lives with, supposedly due to the old man's vulture eye. Narrator's the main character, his mental state deteriorates, the old man's the victim, and we learn little about him beyond his disturbing eye, which is true. This is going into a little bit more detail than the original request that we had put in, at least the initial response to the request that we put in to Claude, providing the text. So it gives, I like how it talks about how it takes place over 8 nights, culminating in the murder, its cover-up, and the narrator's confession. So the central conflict and resolution is this narrator's struggle with his own sanity and guilt. And the conflict is resolved when the narrator confesses. So key themes and literary devices, they include guilt and conscious sanity versus madness, and the power of fear and paranoia. So this is a little bit more in detail perhaps than we saw with GPT-4o. And some of the literary devices, setting, which is claustrophobic, a dark house, point of view, the unreliable first-person narration creates tension and ambiguity about the narrator's own sanity. Symbolism, the eye, symbolizes the narrator's paranoia and guilt, and foreshadowing. And so the narrator's insistence on his sanity at the beginning foreshadows his eventual breakdown. This is interesting because it doesn't talk about the senses, which we'd seen with ChatGPT-4o. So these are all different. They come up with different results. If you ask it to do it again, it will probably come up with a similar response. It might not be word for word the same, but so the writing tone and style, intense and psychological, short punctuated sentences that create a sense of urgency and madness. So you see, when you provide a more detailed prompt, you do get a much more detailed response. And this, I feel like, is even in more detail than we'd seen with ChatGPT-4o. And the quote is different. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. That's at the end when the police are there and they see him. So finally, there's the interpretation and significance. So the work explores the psychological effects of guilt and the power of conscience. It suggests that no matter how carefully one tries to hold their misdeeds, the weight of guilt will eventually lead to their undoing. Of course, it questions the nature of sanity and madness, blurring the line between the two, leaving the readers to ponder where one ends and the other begins. So this is it's a very good summary. And if you remember that the initial summary that Claude presented was good. This is even in more detail. The more detailed the prompt, the better the response you're going to get. But not all models are alike. So now we're going to move on to Gemini. Oh, before I do that, I almost forgot something important. Let's see what Claude says about its sources. Provide your sources. It says, I don't actually have external sources to cite for the analysis I provided. My summary and interpretation were based solely on the full text of the story that you shared in your earlier message, combined with my general knowledge about literary analysis and Edgar Allan Poe's work. So this is interesting. This is different than ChatGPT. He says that that Claude has its own knowledge about this. So it says, I'm synthesizing information from the text itself and applying general principles of literary criticism. I should have made it clear that this was my own analysis based on the text you provided rather than implying it came from specific external sources. Well, I didn't ask it to do that, so it doesn't need to apologize. Yes, and it says you should look at scholarly articles, literary criticism books, or academic databases focused on Poe's works or Gothic literature if you want to find more sources. So this gives a much more detailed response to the source request than we saw with ChatGPT that just said, I got it from the work itself. So the question of sources is interesting. And obviously, it depends on the perspective of the LLM and the training of the LLM. So now we're going to do the same with Google's Gemini. I'm going to paste the prompt in. We'll see what happens. It's going to give numbered or point-based response as well, I think. Oh, maybe I was wrong here. Look at this. It's an actual paragraph or multiple paragraphs. Essay. So this is a story about a man who believes he is sane but commits a murder. The narrator, an unnamed man, becomes obsessed with the old man's eye. He believes the eye is evil and decides to kill the old man. It takes several nights. On the 8th night, so by doing this, you'll see that this detail of the 8th night is coming up more than it had among these LLMs when we first went through the first exercise. The central conflict is the narrator's obsession with the old man's eye. And the narrator believes the eye needs to be destroyed, and the narrator resolves the conflict by killing the old man. The key theme is the narrator's unreliable perception of reality. He believes he's sane, but obviously he's not. And the darkness makes it difficult to distinguish reality from the narrator's perception. The story is told from a first-person point of view, which contributes to the theme of unreliable perception. So this is a key thing that all of these LLMs are noticing, and that is actually it's a good reading. The author uses foreshadowing to hint at the narrator's madness. For example, the narrator mentions his nervousness early in the story. Another is symbolism. The old man symbolizes evil to the narrator. The beating of the heart symbolizes the narrator's growing guilt and fear. So you see, this is interesting. The different LLMs have different interpretations of the symbolism. So the writing style is suspenseful and dramatic. A significant quote it's a different one too. I knew that the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. So this quote shows how the narrator's perception is unreliable. He believes and pities the old man, but his actions demonstrate that he's motivated by hatred. Okay, interesting. So the story's main message is that obsession and paranoia can lead to violence. The narrator's belief that the old man's eye is evil consumes him and ultimately leads him to commit murder. Okay, like this, but you see, it's different than we had just seen with Claude. Maybe a little less detail, but it's not that it's bad. It's different though. You can see the different interpretation. So I'm going to ask. It says the websites reviewed are the one we provided it when we gave it the text to summarize. Could you provide? I'm being nicer here. Your sources. You see, I kind of vacillate between being polite and not in my chat. Requests. So this article does not contain information about the sources used to create the content. Okay. So it's not saying that it's using its own knowledge like Claude had said. It just says it's using this text. Okay. Moving on to Meta AI. Here's what it had provided us with when we asked it to summarize the story. Now we're going to give it the more detailed prompt. Interesting. Okay, the narrator, an unnamed protagonist, attempts to convince the reader of his sanity while describing how he murdered an old man with whom he lived. The narrator is driven by a growing unease with the old man's evil eye, which he believes to be a sign of the old man's wickedness. After dismembering the body and hiding it under the floorboards, the narrator is convinced that he can hear the old man's heart beating. The police arrive to investigate it and report his scream. The narrator's guilt and paranoia ultimately lead him to confess to the crime. So this is a very brief summary. It doesn't have some of the details that we saw with like the eighth night and things like that we saw in some of the other LLMs. Let's see if maybe we see that later on. So the main characters in development, we have the narrator, who's unnamed and is unreliable. This is something we've seen among all of them. And the old man, the victim. Central conflict, the narrator's growing unease with the old man's evil eye leads to a downward spiral of guilt, paranoia, and ultimately confession. And, you know, doesn't talk about the death that occurs, but the resolutions, the narrator's confession to the police, driven by his own guilt and paranoia. Themes, the blurred line between reality and imagination, the power of guilt and paranoia, the darkness and instability of the human mind. Okay, so the themes are somewhat similar, but also unique here. The analysis that it comes up with is different than maybe we've seen with the other LLMs. Literary devices, setting, like we've seen, point of view, we've seen, symbolism of the evil eye, foreshadowing, repeated insistence on sanity foreshadows this eventual breakdown. So it seems like they all have different ideas of the foreshadowing, of what drives the foreshadowing. Writing style is dark, suspenseful, and introspective. Doesn't talk about the Gothic style in this one. Significant quote, maybe it's actually just doing a close reading. Too nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous, I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? Okay, we have a quote. We don't have an interpretation of the quote. Okay. But the story highlights the destructive power of guilt and paranoia and how they can lead to a downward spiral of madness. The narrator's unreliable perspective and the blurred lines between reality and imagination create a sense of uncertainty, leaving the narrator questioning what is real and what is just the narrator's perception. Ultimately, the story suggests that the human mind is capable of darkness and instability, and that the line between sanity and madness is thin. Okay. So this one is decent, but it's, for me, it's a little bit more on the superficial side, but it's not that it's bad, maybe not as detailed as some of the others that we've seen. This is just my personal opinion and what I look for when I'm asking for a summary. And, speaking of this, like this is, I probably wouldn't in a class ask for such a detailed summary because I want my students to do this, but I want you to see how when you provide a more detailed prompt, you get a more detailed response. So that's something good as an instructor to know how, when creating activities, you have to be very careful in the prompts that you provide because they really make a big difference. So anyway, or you can provide this and have your students comment on if they agree or disagree. It's really up to you how you would want to use this in your classroom, what you find most beneficial, how you'd like to use it for critical thinking. And so now we're moving on to Copilot. And as you see here, if you remember that it showed us the sources that it took when we provided the story itself, the Poe Museum being the primary source. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, the plot revolves around an unnamed narrator's descent into madness as they obsess over an old man's vulture-like eye. The narrator development is marked by growing paranoia and guilt after they murder the old man to rid themselves of the eye's gaze. So this is not nearly as detailed as the plot summary that we've seen before in the other ones. The central conflict is eternal with the narrator's mind between their attempt to assert sanity and the guilt that manifests as the sound of the old man's beating heart. And it ends with the confession to the police. Key themes include guilt, the unreliable ability of perception, and the fine line between sanity and madness, claustrophobic setting, first-person narrative, and literary devices like symbolism, heart symbolizing guilt, and foreshadowing enhance these themes. A significant quote from the story is, "I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell." This reflects the narrator's heightened senses and psychological torment they endure. Very interesting. They all have different quotes, because I guess every single sentence is very, very important in this short story, to be honest. The writing style is Gothic, so it does know this, characterized by its focus on horror, death, and psychological depth of the characters. It's anxious and frank, the tone, which is felt through the narrator's vehement insistence in their insanity. And the story's main message may be interpreted as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of guilt and the subjective nature of reality, as the narrator's own mind becomes their greatest enemy. It's a profound exploration of the human psyche and the darkness that can reside within. So this is shorter than most of the others. It's not that it's bad, though. It does answer the questions that we ask, but just more concisely. And as we say, being concise doesn't mean it's a bad summary at all. It's a different way of presenting it. So I'll ask it, can you provide your sources? Let's see what it says. So, as AI developed by OpenAI, I don't have the ability to cite specific external sources or provide URLs. My responses are generated based on a mixture of licensed data created by human trainers, and publicly available data. So it doesn't say that this is coming from the short story. He says, I don't have the capability to access or retrieve personal data unless it has been shared with me in the course of our conversation. So I have provided it, but it's not capable of recognizing that it's been provided. So, okay. All right. I know. Let's move along to Perplexity, which we like because of its sources, and we love that when we provided the text itself, that it showed where it got all of this information for the summary that it provided. So now let's see if it can follow up. This is more similar. Oh, but it's got key points too. So it's a chilling short story narrated by an unnamed protagonist who insists on his sanity while describing a gruesome murder. The plot revolves around the narrator's obsession with an old man's pale blue vulture eye and his decision to kill the man to rid himself of his perceived evil. The characters are the unnamed narrator and the old man, and the narrator's mental state deteriorates, etc., etc. So it's giving the characters central conflict is internal. The narrator struggles with his obsession and guilt. and confession to the murder. Key themes include guilt, madness, and the power of conscience. Of conscience, that is. Poe explores these themes through setting. The claustrophobic atmosphere of the old man's bedroom intensifies the psychological tension. Point of view, first-person narration provides insight into the narrator's unstable mind. As an unreliable narrator, the vulture eye represents the narrator's paranoia and the old man's perceived judgment. Foreshadowing, the narrator's insistence on his sanity at the beginning foreshadows his eventual breakdown. This is something we've seen. This is actually more similar to some of the others that we've seen. So Poe's writing style is characterized by vivid, suspenseful prose. Significant quote is, "It is impossible to say how the first idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night." Another quote. But it doesn't, it just, I guess it encapsulates the story scene of guilt and madness. In conclusion, The Telltale Heart serves as a powerful exploration of the human psyche, demonstrating how guilt and obsession can drive a person to madness. So yeah, Poe's masterful use of psychological horror elements creates a timeless tale that continues to captivate readers with its thrilling portrayal of the depths of human depravity. So this is interesting. It's got all the points. But one thing it does do here that's different than the rest is it provides its sources. Here, its sources are Wikipedia, The Telltale Heart, Summary, Themes, and Analysis from study.com. This is Wikipedia again. Another source. Oh, this is, what am I saying? It's the Telltale Heart, Summary, Themes, and Confessions. So it does include the primary source as well. But this is not just sticking to the primary sources. It's also including secondary source for the interpretation. So it's freely admitting it, showing exactly where it got it, which is kind of a breath of fresh air, which we don't see in many of the other LLMs. So, as you see, they each have their strengths and weaknesses in summarization, but perhaps this tour will give you some insight about which model is best for you. A nota bene here. LLMs behave far differently with well-documented and analyzed texts rather than lesser-known works. In that scenario, having the LLMs do a close reading of the text that I provide usually produces the best results. I found that utilizing multiple models often yields the most comprehensive results. In the classroom, I've used LLM summarization abilities to enhance learning through various innovative approaches. For 200-level courses, I used the summarization tool to create paragraphs with missing words that students must fill in with the word bank that I also asked the LLM to create. I create multiple choice quizzes based on the summaries. We also create reverse summaries where students expand on concise LLM-generated bullet points to craft detailed paragraphs and to develop summary chains where students build on each other's work, using the LLMs to verify and refine their contributions. For advanced classes, students critique the summaries produced by the LLMs and make corrections and additions where necessary. They must know the works well in order to do this. I assign summary debates as well, where students argue for or against the accuracy of LLM-generated summaries, supporting their positions with evidence from the original text. Additional activities include summary evolution tracking, where students analyze how LLM summaries of the same text change over time as models are updated. Multilingual summary comparison, where students in language classes compare LLM-generated summaries in different languages to explore nuances in translation and cultural interpretation. And AI bias detection, where students examine LLM summaries of controversial topics to identify potential biases and propose methods for more balanced AI-generated content. These exercises not only enhance comprehension and analytical skills, but promote a nuanced understanding of AI capabilities and limitations in language processing and summarization. To conclude, I will show you a conversation I had with Claude 3.5 Sonnet about the potential uses for LLM-generated summaries in the various humanities disciplines other than literature. So here you can see the responses of Claude to my requests to come up with activities outside of literature. And for philosophy, it recommends argument reconstruction. Students receive a summary of a philosophical argument and must expand it into a full, logically structured argument. Concept mapping, using a summary of philosophical theory. Students create a visual map showing the relationships between key concepts. Comparative analysis, where students compare LLM-generated summaries of different philosophical perspectives on a single issue. With religion, scriptural interpretation, interfaith dialogue simulation, where they use summaries of different religious beliefs, the starting point for role-playing interfaith discussions. Ritual analysis. For history, primary source analysis, where you pair LLM-generated summaries of historical events with primary sources, asking students to evaluate the accuracy and biases in the summaries. Counterfactual scenarios, where you provide summaries of historical events and have students explore how changes to key elements might have altered the outcomes. So timeline construction using brief summaries of events. Students create detailed annotated outlines. For art history, you can use these summaries for visual analysis practice, where you pair summaries of art movements with images, asking students to identify characteristics described in the summary. Curatorial exercise, provide summaries of various artworks and have students design a thematic exhibition. Style evolution tracking, where you use summaries of an artist's work over time to have students analyze the development of their style. For art, you can use it for technique exploration, art critique practice, conceptual art development. And for anthropology, you use it for cultural comparison, provide summaries of different cultures and have students conduct comparative analyses. As an ethnographic exercise, where you give students summarize ethnographic accounts and ask them to design follow-up studies. For theoretical application, you could also present summaries of anthropological theories and have students apply them to contemporary situations. And finally, for human geography, for example, you use it for spatial analysis, use summaries of geographic concepts to have students analyze real-world locations or phenomena, policy proposal development, and demographic trend analysis. So these are just some uses of the summarization capabilities of LLMs to create activities in your classes. And these are just a few ideas. You can explore, you can ask LLMs for their suggestions, because one thing I've found is that they do help us to think out of the box a little bit and reinvigorate things that we teach, helping us to see things in a different light and to try to change things up a little bit. So I highly recommend that you use the summarization abilities of LLMs to create dynamic classes. That's all for today's episode. Stay tuned for more insights into how AI is transforming the humanities. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. If you have suggestions for the UDO outro or the content of future episodes, suggest them. See you next time.